We are working on our show makeup today, and tomorrow we will be doing hair. So I purposely did not put my hair up all nice and pretty like because I wanted to show you guys that I actually do my hair after I do my makeup. So this is me without my face on. When I go to start, I always make sure that I'm starting with a clean slate. So for my makeup, I will sometimes do a once over with just a simple baby wipe. Now, obviously, all of this is pending any allergies. So if you have allergies to anything, please be aware of that in advance. There may be alterations that you can do and things that you can use differently. Certain exceptions apply. So just take all that into consideration when we go through hair and makeup supplies. I'm not going to be applying any fake eyelashes. We're doing this in the simplistic form. This should be fairly easy stage makeup that you can apply to kids and our really younger dancers and even new dancers. When you start to play with stage makeup, it's a little bit of a challenge. You add a lot of makeup to it, but the supplies we're using today are things that you're able to find just generally in the store, and we're not going into great detail. Later on in the year, I'm actually going to spend a full week doing really detailed stage makeup and different kinds of characters and stuff that we can get into. So I'm not going to apply that right now. Right now is just get your toes wet a little bit here and get comfortable with using some makeup because it takes some getting used to. As you can see right now, my face is a little bland and there's a lot of details that are hidden or darkened right now. And our stage makeup should bring out our facial features. Now, everybody goes into this with different mindsets. There's different ways to do this. So, if your directors have a different way they ask you to apply it, that's totally cool. I, however, design our makeup so that way we're shining the light on your natural features. The thing with that becomes you do look a little silly up close. I'm not gonna lie. But from a distance, and when you have stage lights or things like that, it will be able to see your face a lot better. And that's why it's typically mandatory. It's not because we want to see our younger dancers looking like they're adults and everything. It's simply so we can see facial features. It's part of the costume, it's part of getting into character, and it's really nothing more than that. So, let's get started. First, we're going to wipe our face off, make sure we got everything nice and clean. I prefer to blot rather than like grind it in, just because, again, you don't want to be like shoving circles into your face. That's not cool for our skin. So, again, to each their own. Once I've done that, then I'm ready to get started. For newer dancers, and even when doing makeup on our youth dancers, I actually encourage that we start with our eyes first. I myself don't need a primer. Some dancers do. I am able to go straight for just applying my eyeshadows and stuff. However, I use a cream. I prefer to use a cream. So I actually have one that has a white, and I start with a white base. I toss it on a Q-tip, and I'm going to wipe my eyes out. As you can see, it looks a little on the chunky side. So what I'll sometimes do here is I will use my finger to blend it in nicely. Now, I also have a lot of brushes too, so it's also, when I'm doing this for myself, I'll use more of my detailed brushes, but I know not everybody has those. So in a pinch, you can use your finger. When you do this, you want to make sure that you get nice and far into the crease going into the nose, because that's an area that we tend to hold a lot of shadow in. If you see that it's still on the light side, add some more. In this context, I'm kind of whitening out the underside of my eyes as well. There are different highlighters that you can use, but because my cream eyeshadow is pretty awesome, I will use that as an under eye highlighter as well. And there's more detail on that, like when we go to add fake eyelashes and stuff, how to use like white liners so you can detail your eyes better. In this context, it's just to lighten up a little bit of the underside of the eye. You don't have to do that. It's up to you. Basically, if you smudge any under, just make sure it's well blended and you're good to go. Because I'm using a cream, I want to make sure that that is sealed in. So people have different takes on using talc powder or baby powder. Baby powder can be used to seal in makeup, and any kind of makeup that has a talc base in it is also good for sealing your makeup in. It helps to finish it off. Many eyeshadows have talc in them. Some do not. So again, this comes down to allergies and personal preference, but the talc really helps to get things to stick. So because I did a cream, in order to make that pop and to stick, I'm going to use a talc powder. And in this case, I'm going to use a white eyeshadow that has talc in its base and make sure that my cream makeup sticks. So again, when I'm doing this, I'm going all the way from my lash line clear on up to the underside of my eyebrows. So that whole space is filled in with white. This is going to make my eyes pop by the time I'm done. Now I'm going to start adding the browns. So I ask that my dancers put a line of brown directly on their real crease. When you're doing your standard just day makeup, and for those who are makeup artists, you often put your makeup in what is called the crease. However, in this context of makeup, that's not what we're going for. We want to be able to see your natural eye shape. So we're not creating a false crease out of that. So we're going to follow our exact crease, like where your eye bends. And so I will suggest one of two things. It's really nice if you can start with an eyeliner, like a brown liner, because this is where we're going to start applying browns. You're going to put a brown liner in there and then follow that up with a brown eyeshadow. The liner helps to keep it thin so you're not browning out your entire eye, and that shadow afterwards helps to make that liner stick so it doesn't get smudgy. This is really important on younger dancers who like to play with their faces a lot, even though we shouldn't be. It helps to make sure that it's not going to budge. This line should not touch the corner of your eye or the inside of your eye. We do this because the white is going to open up our eyes. This brown is going to just be a detail. It's not meant to look pretty because, again, we're on stage. So it's going to just be an accent point. Now that I have that brown liner on, I'm going to go over that with a brown shadow. I'm using just a real thin brush. You don't want anything thick, and I see parents trying to use really thick brushes or the applicators that come with the makeup sets. Those often can't detail the way we need. So I am using, like I said, a really thin brush. You can even use an angle brush. And I'm going to dab a little bit into my brown and follow that exact same line. Whenever you're dealing with creams and shadows like this, you want to make sure that you're drawing the lines out and away from your face. So start from the center, work your way out. If you need to, you can do a little bit of a bounce back. You just got to be careful not to like ricochet the shadow back. But you'll find that the lines do different things if you are not careful in how you apply the brush strokes. So you want to make sure that the focal point is pulling out and away. It'll help lengthen the lines out. While I have the brown, I will oftentimes backtrack up to my eyebrows. You want to use a brown that is at least one shade darker than your natural hair color. We want to make sure that it looks like we have our eyebrows, otherwise it can be a creepy look afterwards. Next would be our eyeliner and our mascara. Because we are not using fake eyelashes today, I'm going to crimp my eyelashes. This is an optional step. I do encourage it for those who can handle it. On our younger dancers, I definitely do not suggest this. Same goes for applying false eyelashes. I know some people do make it a requirement. I, however, do not, because it can be a challenge with the younger dancers. I already know what it's like to put makeup on little bodies, and it comes with its ups and downs. So we want to make sure that we're able to do this and not have too many issues. So there's a lot of steps that I will kind of bypass so we at least have the main gist of it. Again, we'll come back to those fake eyelashes later. In the meantime, we're going to crimp our eyelashes first and then put our liner on. You always want to start at the base and work your way to the end, and that way you can create a pretty decent curl in there. I always do that before I do my liner to make sure that I don't smudge my liner when I'm done. Now, there are different types of eyeliners. For those who are just learning how to do their own makeup, like when I'm teaching my youth when it's age appropriate time, or for my new adult dancers who are just applying it, I really suggest that you use a liquid eyeliner that has a pot and a really thin brush in it. This allows for much better control in application. It's also much sharper. For today's purposes, I'm only going to be using a pencil. Now, this is not the most detailed version of this, but it will at least give you an idea. When you apply this eyeliner, you want to keep a little bit of a gap between where your eyelashes are located and where the liner is. You are not applying day makeup, so there needs to be a gap in there so we can see white. Again, this is going to make your eyes pop. We also do not go all the way into the crease. There's a little bit of a gap in there. It's only about pinky distance. That's all it takes. But you keep that open so that way we can open up the eyes. This is also important for when we do go to add those false eyelashes. That's going to make a big difference for how those get applied and everything. We're going to do the same thing on the bottom. So again, it does not touch the eyelash line. We keep a gap, and the end does not connect. We keep a space on the sides, and we keep a space on the inside. Same thing on the other eye. Now, at the end, we want to be able to wing our eyes so it looks like we have false eyelashes. I wait for that, though, until I apply the rest of my face, and then I go back and I do that part. So once we've done the liner, now we have our mascara. I'm particular, so I don't actually use the one brush that came in my mascara set. I use a brush that does a better job of lengthening. For those who have really blonde eyelashes, some mascaras are prone to dyeing the eyelashes a little bit darker. So I haven't done enough research to confirm or deny what to look for in those regards. A lot of us dancers who were around in like the late 80s, early 90s, many of those old mascaras definitely did an interesting number on some eyelashes, but it's just something to be aware of. The type of mascara that I use now, because my eyelashes are actually fairly light in color, has not dyed them. So it took several years for my eyelashes to get back to like their normal shade, but it's just something to be aware of when you are using the black mascara. Whether you use a clear coat first and then add the black mascara, that's something you need to play with and also kind of take in consideration when you are applying it. Once we have applied our eyes, I will sometimes actually now take a moment and seal this part in. On occasion when you're doing this, you may have to backtrack and use a Q-tip, but I don't do that until afterwards. The Q-tip then comes in handy so you can do little quick touch-ups for anything that may have smudged throughout the process. But again, if you take the time to kind of seal that in, you're less likely to have fallout from your makeup, and you're less likely to have smudges occur when you are applying the rest of your face. Once I'm done working on my eyes, I apply my face. So I use just a little wedge. This, despite what it looks like, has only been used once. Um, but I am just reusing it now. I always swap out my wedges. I don't deal with the whole disinfecting them thing because they get disgusting fast. So I use them like once or twice back to back, and then that's about it. And so I am going to go ahead and load that up. So I usually kind of smear it on, and then I go back and I backtrack. Anytime you have a wedge or any kind of application like this, you want to make sure it's damp so you can spread it out properly. Again, some people like to use a primer on their face. I do not. I've never had a reason to use primer, but I've also known a lot of people who need the primer in order to get the makeup to stick. That has never been a concern for my face, so it's been a step that I've omitted. Even after I've tried primer, it has actually just not worked out in my favor for my face. So I just put my liquid foundation on. From here, we are going to start detailing our face. Colors make a difference. Some prefer to use more of the bronzer brown warm tones and detail in those regards. I prefer to have my dancers oftentimes use more of the pink tones because it makes our faces look a bit more youthful, unlike the bronzers and the brown tones that can actually more age us. When we do this, there are, again, a bunch of different ways that you can apply this part, and there's even little nuances that I will add as my dancers get more comfortable with applying makeup. I'll do just a quick run once over of highlighting, but then we are actually going to use the blush to accent our face. We kind of use it as a contour instead of actually contouring our faces. Just like the liquid foundation that I applied my own skin tone foundation instead of going a shade darker and using that to, again, contour our face. I like my dancers to look as natural as possible while drawing out their natural facial features. So I have just a light highlighter and I put that on my cheekbones and I just follow that straight up. I use my wedge again and I just kind of blot that in so that way I have a little bit of just a highlighted glow. Now, I put the highlighter on my cheekbones because we're going to actually put the blush under. This is going to make it so that way it doesn't look like our cheeks are exploding out of our eyeballs. It makes it so on the stage we have facial definition. The highlighter makes our cheeks kind of pop, and the blush underneath then makes it so our face is just that much more accented. In this context, again, I'm using pink, so when I do this, I often ask my little dancers to make a fishy face. Sometimes my adults who need to see exactly where their jawline is, I will tell them to do the same. So when you make that fish face, you can see your jawline and you can see your cheekbone. We want the dark pink or whatever dark shade you are using right underneath that cheekbone. That's going to accent that cheekbone and the highlighter that we just put on. Once you have that, now we're going to take a medium tone and we're going to blend that down. So we pull that dark line down towards our jawbone, and it's going to look a little bit like we have blush sideburns here for a minute. But we stop right where our jawbone is. So we accent that, and that should be our neutral skin tone. From there, I will take the lighter shade and just kind of do a once over, make sure that it's well blended. After that, I tell my dancers it's really up to them if they want to use a bronzer in comparison to a blush or what have you. And we're going to frame out our face. So we want to do a little bit of an accent on our nose. And we want to make a T on our forehead. And then we want to highlight all the way around our hair. Then we go from our ears under, so we have that neutral skin tone should be accented on our jawline right there. We're going to pull under that jawline, so you should be able to see better definition now in my jaw. Because of my complexion, certain shades tend to disappear on me, so I'll kind of blend my bronzer. I did a darker, more burgundy kind of shade first, and then I go back over it with a lighter brown. And then I'll kind of tie that back together with a red, and I'll even out my cheeks one last time so it's all kind of matching. But again, this is just on my face. Some of the blushes and bronzers that I use, I don't actually have to go back over again. It just kind of depends on which brand I'm using. So in this case, I was out of the one that was my perfect one. So we're working with the other set that I've got. That's my like spare. So now I look a little funky. I got some blush that looks like I've got some blush sideburns going on, but that's okay, because now we're going to go over and we're going to do a real quick touch up on those eyes, and then we're going to seal everything in, and this helps make it kind of neutral again. So you want to make sure now that you're not going to mess up your cheek that you just spent so much time on. You want to keep that hand out to the side and gently wing those eyelashes out. You can do as much or as little. Some directors encourage more of a straight line. Some don't care if you curl it. That is debatable. So by the time you're done there, now you should be able to see a bit more of a face. Once we're done with all of that now, we are going to powder everything again. I start with my eyes, and then I work my way up, and I want to make sure that everything is nicely coated in that powder. Now, I'm only doing this once today, but you may need to do a second coat. When you are using makeup that is just from like your average store and you're not using a lot of creams, you are more inclined to have to do a secondary coat. So what I'll sometimes do is I'll do this, and then I will apply another layer. I will also actually use a bit more detail when I'm doing my own makeup. When we go to add lipstick now, I live in the world of threes, so I first off encourage that you use a brush, and we're going to brush the lipstick on. I'm using a dark wine for my lipstick. This is actually one of the go-to colors that I encourage because it's a more neutral color instead of like our bright reds. On occasion I'll ask for bright red if it's appropriate, but that's not always the case. So I do one coat of the lipstick, and I want to make sure that I fill in all the grooves. When dancers are doing this, some people swear by putting on a lip liner and then applying the lipstick. That's totally okay too. This is for those who, again, we're trying to make makeup as simplistic as possible, especially when you're dealing with littler kids. They oftentimes don't want to sit there long enough for some of these things to happen, and if you're also working with a budget and stuff, this is just an easy way, even though it sometimes can take some time, I'm not even gonna lie, but it should be a little bit easier to get your face together. Once we get the first coat on, we're going to blot it off. We're going to take that powder that we applied to our face, and we're going to blot some of that on. Now, I use like a Kleenex or a paper towel to do this because I don't want my makeup brushes being stuck with lipstick on. So we're going to powder it on. And again, you can totally use baby powder for this too. That works. Don't eat the powder. It's pretty disgusting. From there, we're going to apply another coat. You also want to make sure that you dust the powder off in between too. It should only be a light coat or else it's going to get cakey. Same as the first time. Once I get that coat of lipstick on, we're going to finish this now with a final coat of lipstick. Now this lipstick process may seem tedious, but I have found over the years that especially when younger dancers or really nervous older dancers are constantly biting their lips, oftentimes because of stage nerves, this is a pretty good way to make sure that the lipstick isn't going to be disappearing from our faces. Again, there's a lot of emotions behind the scenes, and it's just one of those side nuances. I see parents try to sometimes shortcut doing these steps and just put one layer on, and then I always see kids with their lipstick down to their poor chins. And so it's not a surefire way to prevent that from happening, but more often than not, it does a pretty good job of really locking in the lipstick. So we're going to finish this up with a final coat. You want to make sure you bite that layer down a little bit as well. And as you can kind of see when I'm working the brush, I have actually worked the brush long enough that I don't have to do a full pickup off my face to move it around. I am able to lengthen and pull. You don't want to be grinding circles into your lips or else you're just going to be smudging stuff around, and that's not cool. Once we have this final layer on, we're going to do one last bite and make sure if there's any touch-ups we need to do. I'll sometimes blot around the creases on the outside of my lips just to make sure that there's no bleed through. On my face, I've never had an issue with bleed through coming out of my lips, so that hasn't really been a concern for me. Otherwise, some dancers will purposely use the lip liner to make sure that that does not happen. Once you're done with all of that, like I said, if you need to, you can add more layers. But if you are good, then you are able to use your setting spray. Now, there are different ways dancers can seal off their makeup. You set the makeup and then do the powder. Others will do the powder first and then spray. They do have slightly different effects to your makeup, and it just depends on if there's going to be like more of a matte effect or more of a glistening, finely finished, everything's a bit more blended effect. So that detail is kind of important if your director does stipulate which one they want. So we're going to spray. When you spray, you want to make sure you get everything evenly. Also, eyes closed. You want that to dry a little bit. And then, as you can see, when you are done, you have far more detailed facial features. I'm going to backtrack for a minute and talk about some of the little things that you can do to make some of your makeup more stand out. Again, I did a lighter version of what I will often do. Usually my makeup is on pretty thick because, again, we want to make sure that our audience can better see us. In order to make some of our more sheer powders more visible, you can oftentimes use your setting spray to spray the brush and then apply it. So using your brush, you would want to spray just a little bit, and I will kind of use my hand. Now, mind you, this is my personal set, so like that's okay. And then I would blot into my shadow and then apply, which makes that white a lot darker when I do it that way. And it'll probably take a couple of swipes at it in order to get that to apply, but that makes that shadow a lot brighter than what it would have been previously. If I did that shadow just plain, you can barely see that on my hand. So you want to make sure that if you do need to add some setting spray to it to make it darker, go right on ahead. The same can be said for those browns. If you have a lighter brown, you can also use a setting spray and you make that a darker brown so you have an easier brown to see for your eyes. You can also go over your eyeliner with black shadow. That is actually super important if you are using a liquid or a cream liner instead. You need to seal that in before that dries thoroughly to make sure that it doesn't flake off, especially when we're sweating and the heat of the stage lights. If you are using either the liquids or the cream liner, like I said, you're going to want to seal that in with a black eyeshadow. And again, just as thin. You don't want to be uber thick on the eyeliner. A little goes a long way there. When it comes to removing your show makeup, you can do so a little bit easier by using a baby wipe and a little bit of baby oil when you're done with that, because the baby wipe, we don't want to like completely dehydrate our poor faces, especially after being on stage in the heat of the lights. It can take its toll, especially if you're doing multiple shows. And yes, I know that there are actual makeup remover wipes. However, again, when we're dealing with like the cream makeups and how much we have to get off of our face, it usually gets kind of baked on. And the standard makeup wipes, I've never seen anybody have a really great time in easy removal without dealing with some gnarly facial aftermath. So the baby wipes and the baby oil have been kind of a go-to just because it's a little bit gentler and it usually does the job a little bit faster. The baby oil, again, basically just kind of makes sure that our face doesn't feel all angry and dried out afterwards. So I go over that a little bit with either a paper towel, or I'll actually put some sometimes on a baby wipe and just use that. And you don't need much because, again, you don't want to be greasing up your skin either. My lipstick I will often just take off with just like a really light sugar scrub just so I can just right on off, and usually it's good to go. It just kind of gently exfoliates as I take my lipstick off, because after those 3 layers it can be a little stuck on there. So again, obviously take into consideration any allergies you may have as to how you're able to apply your makeup and what products you use. We always want to make sure that you are, again, dancing safely and even doing your hair and makeup safely. I hope this helps so you have a better idea and are a little less scared of doing all this makeup stuff. I know it's a lot and I know it looks a little silly when we're up close like this, but it's super important so we can see your face when you're out on the stage and see all of your really awesome facial expressions, because again, that's just as much part of the show as the footwork and everything else. I will see you tomorrow as we go to do our hair. I will see you then.